Welcome to Visionary Voices of Tech. I'm Kimmo Leppälä from Qt. Agentic development is moving fast, and engineering leaders working with embedded devices are under pressure to figure out what this means for their teams. And that is what today's conversation is all about. I have three experts here who work at this intersection every day, and they're going to give us the honest picture. Let's start with a quick introduction from each of you. Przemyslaw, Nogaj from the SpyroSoft, if you could start, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Przemyslaw Nogaj. I'm head of the HMI technology at SpyroSoft. And first of all, I'm a day-to-day HMI developer, doing that for almost 20 years already, mostly with Qt through those years. And while I still love getting dirty in the code, a huge of my focus today is making sure that the developers under my care are confidentially moving towards this AI revolution. And once again, I'm excited to be here.
Very good. And then next, Jacob Beningo from the Beningo Embedded Group.
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm Jacob Beningo. I am an embedded software consultant. I've been working in the embedded systems industry for over 20 years. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of developers, lots of teams over the course of the year, helping them, the training in embedded systems, consulting, working on software architecture, and AI is certainly an area that I've seen is revolutionizing the way that we develop embedded systems. So I appreciate the invitation to be here and to talk about where the industry is going.
Very good. And Peter Schneider from Qt.
Thank you, Kimmo. Yeah, my name is Peter Schneider. I'm a product manager here at Qt. I take care of the agentic development tools at Qt, which are out now for 2 months, but I've been working with AI-assisted coding pretty much 3 years by now.
Very good. Okay, so it's clear that we have the right people in the room for this conversation. So let's jump straight into the deep end. Embedded development has always demanded a kind of discipline that general software development doesn't. Tight constraints, real hardware, no room for too many abstractions. So I'd love to start by grounding us in reality. So how have you actually used agentic development in your work, and what did you have to put in place to make it work on embedded targets? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I can go first, actually. It's really thrilling what actually happening right now. At some point, all those AI models, even the agentic development was really good for doing the enterprise development, the backends, front ends, and so on. And now we are trying to push that to the embedded domain. And like you said, we have all those constraints like the memory. We don't have powerful GPUs. We need to care about the every byte. And what's really helping that is if you can skill up your agents, right? So like those skills that Qt company revealed recently, like for example, the QML profiler. I'm using that with my agents all the time, right? So I'm not just blindly seeing if the UI is glitchy on the device. I'm just running the profiler to see where the bottlenecks are. If I'm facing the crash, I'm doing the post-mortem debugging with my another skills with GDB, and I can profile memory with another skill for the Valgrind and so on. So this is really helping to keep the performance in the right bounds, but also other things like the ability to actually study new hardware, right? This is always have been really painful. And now your agent can understand what is the hardware configuration, what are the available ports for those MCUs, how to configure the memory banks in the most optimal way. You don't need to care about that, right? You just need to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate too much. And that's a really big challenge.
All right. What about others?
Yeah, so I'll hop in here. So in general, not just necessarily just the agentic workflows, but just AI in general, the way that I've been using it, really kind of spans, in the event of actually developing code, which is where we tend to, I think, focus a lot. But I found that actually using agentic workflows, AI, skills, agents, MCP, RAG, has a lot of different opportunities in the entire embedded software development system. So while I see a lot of focus for helping people debug, there's also a lot of uses that I've used it for to actually improve my workflows for the way that I develop systems. So there's always things that we've been supposed to be doing while we develop systems, right? But we never had the time or money. And so we cut corners, we do things that maybe we say, this will be okay. And then it ends up resulting in us spending, half of our time debugging a system, right? Well, I found that using agentic workflows actually help with us with define our requirements, develop user stories, actually perform, verifications, develop unit tests. Think about all those different things in the software development lifecycle. And those are all areas where we can actually leverage agentic workflows and AI. And so those are, just an example of a couple of different areas I've been using it in. But I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit on where you can actually get started with AI and start to apply it to the way that you develop systems. And it's not just to generate code, and it's not just in a chat-based manner.
Okay, very good. And that's what you're seeing, Peter.
Well, I'm not like these two experts on actual developers, so I'm typically representing the novice, the average ununderstanding developer here that goes in something new. So for me, a lot of things like managing CMake project, or is this UI control even big enough for a touch device when you press on a finger? These are things that I don't know by experience, so I'm learning from these very basics. So very often when I do my testing of these new agentic development capable, I represent the unfamiliar, the novice, the student, the one that tries to figure out how to do this. And it helps a lot because I'm a beginner in this. And as product manager, of course, I work with people that know this very well. So for me, this is always a journey of like, now I know how to do this next time as well. But it's good if somebody can suggest that to me in the beginning of, hey, remember, when you design your UI, the finger has to fit there on this HMI. Otherwise, it ain't going to happen.
All right. Very good. Very good. So let's jump to the next topic then. To me, it sounds like that we are seeing real traction, but also there could be some friction when it comes to agentic development for embedded. And if we are thinking of the embedded, the friction typically comes from becomes critical when we move from the experimentation to production. As we know, embedded systems don't just crash the application, but they can crash the entire devices, physical devices, like a car or medical devices or whatever. And this is, of course, raising the stakes considerably. So let's talk about the trust. Where do today's AI agents fall short when they meet the real hardware? And can you trust what the agents build?
I'll hop in here to start. And maybe this is a little bit opinionated, but my initial suggestion is that you don't trust it, right? It's a very powerful tool, but you can look at it as an inexperienced engineer. They have, they've gone to school, they have all the knowledge, but they don't necessarily have the experience to apply it for what you're actually building. And it's a super smart colleague who needs direction. They need to be reviewed, or at least if they're not going to be reviewed, you need to have a good spec in place for the agent to actually build what it is that you want. You need to be able to build validation outputs for the skills or the agents that you're building, so that they actually go through checklists to validate that what you have them building is what should actually be built. There's these really interesting things like spec-based development and tools like Cairo, where you can actually go through and specify what it is you want the agent to build. And some of these different techniques are designed to help ensure that what it's building can be trusted. But ultimately, when you first start playing around with these technologies, look at it as a tool. Don't look at it as, I just say build a widget and it's going to know what, it's going to figure out all the assumptions that you normally make, right? Whenever a customer comes to us and says, hey, build this, we end up with a million questions and a bunch of assumptions that we come up with. These tools have the exact same issues where they'll make an assumption and completely go down a rabbit hole. So I personally would say be very careful, validation, and follow your normal rigorous engineering practices.
Yeah, that's true, really true. Because when you start playing with those things, you think, those are outsmarting you. Those are much smarter than you. But those are, I would say, kind of smart idiots, right? So they have a lot of knowledge, but if you will allow them to use that without any supervision, then it will sooner or later break, right? So sooner or later you will reach the point where you cannot add another feature because that breaks another 10 features. And I really like what you said, right? So you need to have the feedback loop always. First of all, your eyes, treat that LLM as or the agents as your pair programmer, where you are in the driver's seat, not allowing them to drive. But also thinking about the safety critical systems like medical or automotive, where you have all those ISO standards, right? And now think about what you can do with MCP and or just calling the tools like Axivion, which allow you to validate if the code follows the standard, right? Once again, returning to the Qt agentic skills, we have C++ and QML review skills, right? I really often use those. Even for the handwritten code, because that allows me to automate some way of thinking and starting the feedback loop between me and my co-driver, which never takes the driving wheel. Never allow them to do that. Not yet, maybe someday. But for now, make sure you are supervising all of those and you are looking on the results from different angles, quality, memory footprint, architecture, because those things can really easily break and are really fragile if you want to keep the hygiene.
Yep, I fully agree. I mean, you ship it, you own the code, so you better know what's in the code. So that doesn't go away with agentic development. Will people need to learn over time to skim in their code reviews? Like we have learned to read a huge amount of news in the internet, and we have become very good in finding the important stuff and zeroing in on it. Yes, that might be that the senior engineers, they need to learn to be faster in reviewing all that code is being generated, and you start needing to skim and understand, okay, this is an architecture flaw. Oh, this is a thing I need to look at and not do a line-by-line review anymore. So I think this will change and the trust will shift. But we also see it's not only the code review skills that Qt has done, but if you look all the big agentic harness makers, I mean, whether it's Anthropic, GitHub or OpenAI, they all have like this code review function. Before you merge anything on GitHub, we have this code review agent service, and they all provide this kind of service. So everybody in the industry knows moving that trust and providing that as a service is a big thing. I'm very careful with these code reviews based on large language models. I think there needs to be always a strong component of deterministic review in there. Static code analyzes, deterministic analyzes. Yes, the suggestion what to do then can be again by a large language model, but defining the static code analyzer that you mentioned in regulated industry, that needs to have a deterministic kind of nature, and that needs to be part of that review process, even if it's a helper only.
Yeah, I would say that it's like on the code review for the Qt project, right? You have these +1 and +2 approvers. For me, the review from LLM is the +1, right? There always needs to be a human in the loop that say, yeah, that's a final approval that works, right? But still, those models can catch a lot of potential failures. Also, they can have a bigger scope. Usually when you have a code review and you see only a fraction of the code, and usually the people just don't go deeper, right? And those models go deeper, actually. They look for the potential pitfalls in other places, which is really helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Still on the same topic, is there anything that you would like to add for the maintenance, vulnerability management, or regulatory compliance on this topic? That how would you consider those with the agentic development? You, Przemyslaw, already touched this topic a little bit, but maybe we could go a bit deeper also.
If I may continue.
Yeah.
For example, in Europe, right? Because I know that we are being watched worldwide. In Europe, we have this something called CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, which will be mandatory for every equipment sold in the United Europe, and that also affects or mainly focuses on the code, right? And it puts a lot of responsibilities on the developer because now you need to be liable on the code quality. You need to be able to deliver quickly the fixes for the security constraints. And we already started to build the agentic pipelines that help to monitor the known vulnerabilities on the network, right? Because that's one of the part that help you to ensure that there is a code traceability and stuff like that. So I guess more and more such regulations will come worldwide. I've seen similar in the APAC, similar in Canada. Also, US is working on similar regulations, right? Because in this crazy world, when we deliver more and more software, it's really hard to say who's responsible for the software failure. Where someone could say that LLM is another vector that could be the potentially someone who breaks something, right? And we also need to consider that. So there's a lot of factors. The environment around us is changing, also the legal environment. And I would say that actually it helps to automate some part of these flows. Still, we need to make sure that those are reliable, that those won't ignore some red flags, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
I want to just add one more thing. I mean, if you think about this industry, let's take last 5 customers from regulated industry, let's say defense and medical. I mean, we see significant turn in the 9 months. I mean, maybe one customer 6 months ago in the medical industry has said they won't even touch AI assistants. And now they have actual targets in terms of this much amount of committed and approved code going into the code base needs to be AI generated. So you see a significant shift, even from the defense sector. There, we have customers that ask us, which large language model can I put in my bunker, in my data house, my data center? So we see a significant shift. So yes, some industries will be slower in adapting that and shift having code that actually goes into their products. But I think everybody is waking up now to the productivity gain. And yes, it will. I mean, we are talking anyway. Embedded device is not the fastest. This is not consumer products. This might take 2-5 years before it's actually happening in the products in some industries. But we see the shift in the last maybe 6-9 months. Maybe I can narrow down even to that time window.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very true. Thank you. So let's move on to the next topic. So you've already established that the trust and the stability are the foundation. But even if an agent produces correct code, it isn't necessarily enough in embedded. So you also need fast and lean. And the challenge there is that what is expensive on the real hardware is often invisible in simulation, or if you are running it on desktop, for instance. So let's bring the hardware into the conversation. Is it possible to optimize agentic UI code for the target hardware in high quality by still keeping the hardware in the loop?
I'll mention, yes, absolutely. This setup actually behind me here, I've got an MSO scope and I've got a development board, a system I'm working on. This works through an agentic workflow where the hardware is in the loop. It's able to actually pull data directly off. The AI skills and agents and the RAG databases I've set up are actually able to essentially on their own pull the data, write drivers, check the feedback from it, and optimize for the hardware that's actually operating on. So, I think that there's a lot of teams throughout the industry that are actually experimenting with those types of things. There's lots of people developing tools. And so the short answer is yes. You can definitely use AI to optimize. And I've seen it where, we've worked on projects where we had an algorithm that was using up way too much processor capabilities, and we identified this one area of code, and then we made the change, but then said, hey, let's see what AI comes up with, and it actually came up with the exact same solution, if not better, for that exact same performance optimization. So it definitely, I would say, is yes.
Yeah, and I would say that actually you can put any kind of hardware in the loop, right? So like said by Jacob, he has some really low-end devices, and I was also, for example, playing with Qt for MCU, trying to really squeeze the binary size, really squeeze the CPU cycles, and actually I was having agents loop running all over, trying to optimize what happens in code, just to make sure the number of CPU cycles is not degrading the performance, right? So I had the feedback loop on the logs, printing the FPS count, and it was constantly building a new solution, deploying it to the board gathering new logs, and thinking what else could be done. So that's pretty fast, right? So I would say that's something that would manually, or each of those runs manually would cost me something like half of an hour, right? Modify the code, run, gather the logs, analyze the logs, right? Now I can do in the matter of minutes, right? Even if still I'm modifying the code, I can still run the agentic loop to see if the result was what I was expecting, right? So that's really important to actually not play with simulation, not try to run on the desktop. Try to always run that on the hardware, because that's the best you can do.
Yeah, definitely. Can you is there some constraints that you need to consider in detail when it comes to trying things out on the target devices?
Yeah, this is, I think, something that Peter mentioned, right? You have the industries where the confidentiality is really important, where you cannot run the things through the cloud even, right? Because there's some prototype, there's some hidden feature. You don't want that to be stored, right, somewhere, and that's a constraint, right? That's where you could probably experiment with some local models, because usually you don't need some frontier models like latest Claude or ChatGPT just to handle a simple log parsing, right? That, or understanding, summarizing, that can be done by some smaller local models, and that's always a good thing to consider if you want to burn your tokens over the cloud, sending them tons of logs, or maybe just have a local setup with local agent and local model that will summarize the logs and just leave the reasoning to the frontier models. So that's always a constraint.
We see some as well constraints is in how large language models still behave by probability. Like very often they will suggest code. I mean, not for novice users like for me. I'm not a senior software developer like Przemyslaw and Jakob. They would never do that mistake. But when I get a UI component like a shape, I might get it very often suggested by Claude as a canvas. Oh yeah, because they have seen millions of billions of lines of code in the HTML world with Canvas. So it might suggest just that one, but it's definitely not the best one on an embedded device, and there's better ways of doing this for an HMI device. But it will
But
always
actually,
start with this one because it thinks that's really good. The probability that this is the right solution is very high because of my neural network. I'm favoring this one.
Funny, because actually that was a often problem when I left all 4 experiments, when I was leaving that unattended. It was always using the canvas, right? Until I've created a skill called Canvas Painter, which explains how to replace the HTML canvas with this new module from Qt, right? And the performance boost is already visible, right? So, but on the other hand, sometimes it surprises me how those models are smart, right? They can figure out, for example, how to catch the screenshots. I was trying to explain that something doesn't look properly. I was pasting the screenshots, right? And then the tool itself figured out, yeah, now I will run. I will use some X tools, and I will grab the screenshots myself. I will try to click and see what's there and if I'm improving. And there was a loop already of improvement, right? So always good to also observe the tools, and so from time to time say, hey, that's cool. Could you convert that to the skill, right? Because that's a really valuable discovery. I wouldn't figure that myself, but you figured it out. Let's write it down, right? So that's also, once again, don't leave your tools unattended because you might miss something important.
And I'll add, if you do a really good job of setting up your context and your specifications of what it needs to build, that can ensure that it's a lot smarter at what it's building, and it knows this is embedded. This is kind of our background information of what we're actually trying to do, and then you will go through fewer loops with the tool, even though multiple loops really doesn't cost us much time or money. But if you go through too many of them, the token costs can certainly add up over time. So,
and the results are degrading over the loops, right? So it's also
exactly
another constraint here.
Very good. Okay. Then let's move on to the next topic. So Thinking from the business perspective, if we are thinking that the agents can handle more and more of the implementation work, as we have learned today, like optimization, validation, iteration, that is fundamentally changing the economics as well. So let's talk about what all this actually costs and what it means for the humans in the loop. So continuing on the topic of the real cost of the AI, how do you balance the token cost with human labor costs?
Nice topic.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the, I mean, there will be I mean, if time going forward, there will be always that component of, here's my tool cost for agentic development, right? So that will be like, I'm currently paying for IntelliJ or whatever, Jira and other tools. So it will be part of that component. So you will have to have a budget for that. That is not new, but it will be a new cost item that you will have. But it doesn't mean that when you create skills or tools, that you need to, like I think Przemyslaw said it already earlier, that you should always rely on the LLM to solve a problem, because a lot of things you can just do with a script, a Python script, and solving that one, running it locally, or you use a locally running model just to plow through log data. And in many cases, you can also use a less smart model or less expensive model. Like we use very often, we swap between Sonnet 4.6 and Haiku 4.5, because Haiku will then be just good enough for resolving that one conflict. You give it a task, is it A or B? Which one to pick? So you need to steer your skills to, first of all, use the least expensive, and then, but also you definitely need to put in scripts that there you have the benefit of them being both deterministic and also at pretty much the cost of electricity.
Yeah, I think you hit some really good points there about the trade-offs with the different models, along with using some local versus on the web. And I think when I look at it from whenever you're working with these tools, I think from a management perspective, you think of return on investment, right? I kind of mentioned earlier that I often see that there's more work to be done than any development team actually has the ability to do, right? I always joke that when we start a new project, we're already 3 months behind and over budget, right, on day one. And so I see these tools as being a way not to like replace people, but to essentially give extra hands to developers. That if they leverage these tools properly, they can actually be more efficient. They can get more done. They won't have to work on weekends or have extra stress and pressure necessarily put on them. Although I do find we tend to find always more and more work to do. So that pressure may never actually go away. But I think you definitely have to have a balance there and say these tools aren't going to replace people, but it's going to make your team more efficient, more productive. And there's certainly a balance level where you have to look for every team and say, okay, how much are we willing to invest in these tools in order to get a certain amount of performance out of our team? And I think you really have to make sure that you have a good metrics workbench or scoreboard set up for your team to be able to actually monitor, okay, we're spending X amount. What are we actually getting out of these tools? What's the cost of using these models? So we actually need, do you need to be using Fable 5, which no one can use at the moment that we're recording this, for, processing your email? And the answer, like you already mentioned, is no. You can go back to Haiku or you can go to Sonnet or something that's less powerful. And I think by using different levels of models for different things, even within the same workflow, can help you to optimize what output you get from the system, and make sure that you don't, spend $100,000 in a month on tokens. We've seen articles of people token maxing and things like that. And, I have a simple $100 subscription for Claude, and man, I try as hard as I can to try to, maximize that thing to the full. And I just have not been able to do it. And so I think if you're working smart, then, $100 a developer per month, you can get a lot of real work done. So.
Yeah, that's all true, right? So I think that the current times are really headache for the all the CFOs, which was recently proven by the Uber, right? But yeah, this is amazing evolution also for the developers, right? So I never liked to actually code, right? Because that was tremendous job, right? So just typing the code isn't a fun, right? Seeing the results, solving the problem, that's a really interesting fun thing, right? So, and we are already past that, because I can write all this boilerplate, especially the repetitive code. with LLMs, right? I just need to review that, right? But then I have more space for actually vision the whole system, right? Seeing what can be done, what I have missed, maybe implement the features that otherwise I wouldn't be able to implement, or improve the code quality, right? And as an interesting example, recently I was working on the application that was depending on some on the edge image processing model, right? And the only thing that I knew was the protocol, and I wanted to really test that, right? And I'm not the AI specialist, and I've just asked my LLM to actually create the vision model for me. Here is the protocol. We will exchange the data this way. And this allowed me to actually implement all the features really quickly without waiting for all those things to actually happen in the implementation by the other team, right? So I find the dependency, and I was able to actually polish the features even before they and completed their work, right? So I have the feeling that while now mostly we are reviewing the code, at least at some teams, now you need to think about yourself as the orchestrator for all those tasks, right? Put the plan, like said by Jacob, the spec-driven development. This is a great thing, but you need to create that spec. You need to put the constraint. You need to think about the architecture of such solution and make sure that it's still there. And then you can use your imagination and this free time to actually do something constructive, right? To create something more, some value added, and finding the balance between the cost and the results. This is really what we need to figure out still. Now everyone is just burning the tokens, but that won't last forever, right? So we already see the pricing changes in the Copilot. We see the pricing model change in the Anthropic models. And now we need to spend those tokens more wisely. Like, I don't know, the Router LLM. This is really a fantastic project that allows you to do that without your input, right? So you can route between this Haiku model or maybe some locally hosted Quen model, whatever, and some frontier GPT 5.5 or Fable, if they will unblock that. Then yeah, that's fantastic times we are living.
One thing that I kind of, as you were talking through that, all the different examples that you gave me, or that you gave all of us, I think a good summary or a mental model or a mental shift that I've been using is that we are moving away from being embedded developers to actually being embedded systems engineers. We're all worried about letting go of the code and the low-level interactions with the hardware because that's the stuff that we really love. But ultimately, we are moving into that area where, people don't hand code assembly anymore, right? We write C, Rust, C++, and we let the compiler, generate that in the machine code for us. Well, now AI is providing that same shift for us now, so that now instead of having to worry about the low-level details like this, we're now systems engineers thinking at a higher level, thinking about the problems the customer actually has and how to solve them, and then letting the AI tool do that transition and basically, create that code in those systems for us. So
yeah, this is like Peter said. This is another tool that augments us, right? It gives us some new possibilities, and we need to learn how to use that, which is hard because it changes each week with some new interesting workflows or new interesting models approaches. But yeah, that's a time for the fast adaptation, and who will be able to adapt shouldn't be worried about the workplace.
Yeah, very good point. Still on this topic, so has this already changed how you hire or train your people? So do you see already this in the hiring process?
Well, of course, when we built the agentic development tooling team, it's mostly a mindset thing. I mean, it's new for almost everybody. So you need the mindset of people having the curiosity and the willingness to adapt that, right? If you have people like that, they're at the end of their career curve and they're saying, I will make the last 5 years still writing COBOL and assembler, yeah, probably not what you want to hire. I mean, so it's a mindset thing, I would say. But I think we're all learning. I mean, this is 2 years ago, nobody thought that this would be possible at this level, that you delegate so much of your work out. I mean, we came from code completion and single prompts that give me some expert advice to like, do this thing and see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, I think that maybe a month or 2 months ago, as a part of our AI shift process, actually I had to update our review questions, right? And actually what I was looking at was what Peter mentioned, right? It's not about particular or knowing of particular tools. Like I said, those tools are changing each week, right? It's rather about being able to adapt, being curious enough, thinking. One of the questions there, I think, was how else you think you could improve your workload with the agentic development, right? It's quite open questions because many times people are just answering what they are missing and what they are waiting for, and that also engages the discussion, right? And allows you to think from a different angle, and that's for sure impacts who we hire, right? Like Peter said, it's not time for stabilization. It's time for being really energetic on that and being really trying to discover most of that because the world is spinning faster and faster. And we need people that will be spinning with us, not staying in a place.
For sure. Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered already a lot of stuff, actually, technical realities, trust questions, economics. Let's go into a little bit more personal. So I think the most honest question you can ask a person is what keeps them up at night, and also what gets them out of the bed in the morning. So quick round for this. What is concerning you the most, where this is heading, and also what excites you the most?
I think from my perspective, the thing that concerns me the most is people just trusting whatever the output of the model is. I like to think that as engineers, we tend to think a little bit more critically, and that we want to, anything that we get out from the tools, we stop and say, okay, is this plausible? Is this real? But I very much get concerned that over time we get such good outputs that we stop challenging what is actually being output by the models. Okay, so that's the thing I'm most worried about. The thing that I think is actually pretty exciting is just where this can actually lead, right? The efficiency levels. I've always been helping. One of my, I guess you could say, one of my roles, I guess I've always seen it as, is to help educate and modernize the way that people develop embedded systems. And using AI in different areas of that modernization process, whether it's improving your build systems, improving your architecture, implementing test-driven development or other agile methodologies. AI can help you accelerate all that and put together workflows that really makes every developer a lot more efficient. And I see so many mistakes that happen in the industry, so many disasters. Generally, that come down to the fact that we just don't have enough time to do what we're supposed to do. And I get really excited, every morning to see where can I apply AI today to actually get rid of the chances that there'll be a disaster in some of the products that people are working on. How can we make sure that, famous examples of rockets exploding or medical devices overdosing people with radiation, how do we use these tools to make sure that those types of things don't happen and that our systems are a lot more robust and that we can actually build, I'll say mission critical or mission safety based devices to be a lot more cost effective. So I think there's a lot of benefits overall that we can see AI being used for. It's actually a really exciting time. So anyone who's fluffing off and saying, no, AI is not right for us or it's not good for embedded or whatever, I think they're kind of sticking their head in the sand and really missing out on an opportunity to just kind of revolutionize the way that they build things and the way that they change the world for their customers as well.
I mean, what doesn't give me sleepless nights is I can't get Fable 5, or my Copilot subscription doesn't give me GPT 5.5 because I don't have the best of the best. I can very well live with that one. I'm a happy Sonnet 4.6 user, and that gets me through most of the stuff. What gets me out of bed is I think currently the speed and the energy of the evolution. I mean, we've been doing these agentic development skills now for 2 months, and overnight we will break the 150,000 clones. So 150,000 clones of our skills being taken worldwide. And that's like, you're making impact. You're helping. Every day there's 1,500 people coming to clone our skills. And it's like, okay, this is fun. This is nice to help people.
All of those clones comes from me.
How much machines?
No, just kidding. Just kidding.
There's an agent in the background that keeps cloning everything.
Like Copilot and Claude and wherever you use it, but
yeah. Actually, I'm sleeping quite well at night because my agents are working. So I'm using this night time to actually let the free experiments, right? So I'm just starting and checking where it can go unattended, right? Or trying to adjust some flow to check how it can work and do some experiments I never had a chance for or time for to do that, right? So that's where my night usage is going. But what really concerns me is about how this current generation of the developer-centric market will behave, right? Because we have mentioned that all those models or agents are good to support you, but that's because you already experienced, you already know what to expect, you already know what can be there and what can go wrong, right? And what I'm afraid of is with this new generation entering the job market, right? They won't know other side of the fence, right? They never will probably write too much code manually, and the question is where it will end. I hope not the rockets exploding, but also I'm a bit concerned about how that will impact the evolution, right? So if you will think about how the new frameworks were created or how the new compilers, languages, programming languages were created, all that was the invention of the human, right? And we don't have the AGI yet. So I'm curious if in this LLM-driven world, still there is a place for innovation, or we will just repeat all over and all over the same patterns, right? But I hope there will be a lot of people that will argument with those tools just to deliver next iteration of something, next iteration of the idea, better ideas, better solutions. So hopefully the future is bright.
Very good. Okay, on that note, thank you for the panelists and thank you for the audience for joining us today. If there are any questions, we'll follow up after the session. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.